They were supposed to be gone for a week, a mother and daughter visiting friends. Nothing unusual. But when their car never left the driveway and no one heard from them again, something felt wrong. 13 years later, a rusted shipping container is opened on a foggy hillside. What's inside rewrites everything their family thought they knew. The first few days after Jessica Myers and her 7-year-old daughter, Avery, left their duplex in Yom Hill, Oregon, no one was particularly worried. It was June of 2009. School was out, and Jessica had told her sister she was planning to drive Avery upstate to visit friends in Beaverton for a few days. Jessica had even arranged to leave her dog, Tucker, with a neighbor. She said she'd be back by Saturday. The neighbor, Mrs. Ellison, later told investigators she even left food out for the dog. Nothing seemed out of place, but Saturday came and went. And when Jessica didn't show up for work on Monday, something she had never done in the 4 years she'd worked the front desk at Valley Physical Therapy, her boss called her emergency contact. Her younger sister, Laura, picked up the phone. "What do you mean she didn't show up?" Laura asked. Jessica had always been punctual, reliable. She hadn't called, texted, or posted anything online since Wednesday night. Just a simple status update about Avery picking wildflowers on the roadside. Laura drove to Jessica's house that afternoon. The blinds were closed, the porch light still on in the middle of the day. Jessica's silver Toyota Corolla was parked in the driveway, keys not inside, and the front door was locked. Tucker was pacing inside, barking anxiously from behind the front window. Laura used the spare key and let herself in. The house was spotless. A pair of mugs sat by the sink. Avery's backpack was hung neatly on its hook, and Jessica's purse was on the dining table. Wallet and ID inside, but no cell phone. Number note. No signs of violence. No sign they'd even packed. The weird thing was, Laura told the police later, she'd made the beds that morning like she was planning to come back. Deputies from the Yamhill County Sheriff's Office were called in. They searched the home, the surrounding area, and spoke. 2 neighbors. No one had seen Jessica or Avery leave. No one had seen them come back either. The car was impounded and inspected. No fingerprints except the usual, no dirt or gravel suggesting a recent trip. It looked like it hadn't been driven in days. One neighbor reported seeing Jessica walking to the mailbox Thursday morning, a day after she was supposedly already gone, but she was too far away to be sure. Another said he'd seen Avery riding her bike in the cul-de-sac that afternoon, wearing a pink helmet with cartoon stickers on it. "I thought maybe they'd changed their plans," the detective later wrote in his notes. "Maybe they never left town." But then, where were they? Avery's bike was found in the garage, helmet on the seat. Weeks passed. A missing persons bulletin was issued. Jessica's phone pinged once, briefly, near Salem, nearly 50 miles south, then never again. Investigators weren't sure if it was a real signal or a glitch. Volunteers combed nearby trails and parks. Flyers went up, but no trace of Jessica or Avery was found. Nothing was stolen, no forced entry, no financial activity. It was as if they'd simply evaporated. Laura couldn't accept that. "I kept telling them, someone has her, someone knows," she said. She hired a private investigator and kept Avery's room exactly as it had been, drawings taped to the wall, a stack of books by the bed, and her favorite stuffed otter, Mr. Nibbles. Sitting quietly on the shelf in the years that followed, the story faded from the news. Jessica's employer eventually replaced her. Avery's school left an empty desk in her second-grade classroom for weeks before finally taking it down. But Laura never stopped looking. Then, one winter morning in 2022, 13 years later, a mechanic in rural coastal Washington opened a rusted storage container he'd been told to haul for scrap. Inside, buried under old tarps and crates of junk, he found a blue child's backpack. Inside the backpack was a worn notebook with a cartoon dolphin sticker and a name written in pencil on the inside cover, Avery Myers. The mechanic's name was Rob Rees, a 58-year-old who'd spent most of his life fixing up junkers and hauling scrap across the coastal counties of Washington. He wasn't expecting much when a local farmer called him about an old shipping container rusting away on a hillside near the edge of the property. "It's been there since before I bought the land," the farmer had said. "It's no key, probably empty. Take what you want. I just want it gone. The container was tucked behind a crumbling slope near the edge of a dried-up inlet that hadn't held water in decades. When Rob arrived, he figured it was more trouble than it was worth. The exterior was completely rusted through in parts, doors jammed shut from years of neglect. But when he finally managed to break one of the latches with a crowbar and the help of a winch, the metal creaked and groaned like it hadn't been opened in decades. I remember thinking it smelled wrong, Rob later told the sheriff's office. Not rotten, just stale, like mold and wet cardboard. At first, it looked like a hoarder's unit, stacks of plastic crates, an old mattress rolled up and taped at the ends, tarps covering boxes labeled in marker shop supplies, tools, misc. Then he saw the backpack shoved behind a cracked plastic bin, dirty but intact, faded blue with a small stitched dolphin charm hanging from one of the zippers. Inside were a few crumpled worksheets, 2 melted crayons, and a spiral notebook. The pages were water-stained, edges curled, but the name was still readable in shaky pencil. Avery Myers. Rob stood there staring at it for a long time before, realizing he needed to call someone. Within 90 minutes, container site was sealed off, yellow tape marking the perimeter. Deputies from Pacific County arrived first, followed by a forensics unit from Olympia. Rob was asked to stay behind the line. He did, pacing, chain-smoking, unable to stop replaying what he'd seen. Inside the container, they found more. A small plastic bin filled with folded children's clothes, mostly girl sizes, and a Ziploc bag holding a pair of tiny pink sneakers. A coffee can held a bundle of dull crayons, and beneath the mattress was an old flip phone with a cracked screen and no battery. In the corner, hidden under an upturned drawer, was a stuffed animal, small brown otter, with one eye missing. Detectives made the connection almost immediately. That same afternoon, Laura Myers got a call from a detective with the Washington State Police, a name she hadn't heard in years. Her heart dropped. "Ms. Myers, we believe we may have found something belonging to your niece." She flew out the next morning. When she arrived at the container site, officers walked her through what they'd found. She didn't cry, not at first, but when they showed her the otter, she reached out without a word, fingers trembling, and just held it for a while. "That was Mr. Nibbles," she said quietly. "Avery wouldn't go anywhere without him." The photos made headlines the next day. Cold case. Evidence of missing mother and child discovered in abandoned container. Media trucks arrived within hours. Theories flooded in, but investigators were careful with their wording. "There are personal effects inside the container that we believe belong to the missing individuals," Sheriff Hoy told reporters. "We are not yet confirming their presence at the site or the circumstances surrounding these findings, but there was one thing no one could ignore on the inside of the container door. Barely visible through the rust and dust, someone had scratched words into the paint 5 lines. Uneven, jagged. I'm okay. Avery is safe. Keep looking. Don't. Trust him." Investigators took photos, samples, ran tests. The scratches were old, years old. The message was real. Now everyone wanted to know who him was and how long this container had been hiding the truth. Laura sat quietly in the back of the sheriff's SUV, parked just outside the containment tape, staring at the shipping container. It had been over a decade since she'd allowed herself to think this deeply about her sister Jessica and little Avery. Every year the pain had sunk lower beneath work, beneath coping, beneath even memory. But now it was rising back to the surface, loud and impossible to ignore. The rusted container didn't look like much from the outside, but to Laura, it was like a wound split open after all these years. Officers had warned her not to jump to conclusions, that everything would still need testing, that nothing was confirmed. But they had let her see the backpack. She didn't need confirmation. That was Avery's. She remembered buying it for her niece on her 5th birthday, with silver dolphins embroidered on the front pocket. Avery had loved dolphins. Inside the container, forensics officers moved carefully, logging every item, photographing the scene from every angle. A temporary canopy had been set up to shield the evidence from the light drizzle that had started. Laura watched one of the techs crouch down and carefully brush away dirt from the corner where the mattress had been unrolled. Sheriff Hoy approached. clipboard in hand, and offered a tired, practiced smile. "Found something else," he said gently, crouching slightly beside the open SUV door. "It's a photo, slightly burned at the edges, but it looks like it was folded inside the notebook." He handed it to her inside an evidence sleeve. It was a picture from a summer picnic. Laura remembered it instantly, her sister Jessica holding Avery in her lap under a tree, both smiling with ice-cream-stained lips. She felt her breath catch. That photo had only ever existed as a printed copy in Jessica's house. Never posted online, never scanned. It meant the person who left it had been with them. Hoy hesitated. "There's more. I wanted to ask if you recognize this man." He showed her a grainy black and white still pulled from the container's flip phone. The screen was cracked, but the image was mostly intact. Jessica was standing beside a man, white, mid-30s, buzzcat, wearing a work vest and gloves. The setting looked like a garage or some kind of storage unit. They weren't smiling. Laura squinted. "No," she said slowly. "He's not family, not anyone Jess ever introduced me to." The sheriff made a note. "We'll try facial recognition. There's a chance it could be connected to a contractor or service worker." The landlord said Jessica hired movers a few times before. She vanished. No records on file, though. Laura leaned back, overwhelmed. "Do you think she left willingly?" she asked, her voice thin. Hoy paused, then answered carefully. "There's no sign of forced entry in the container, but the items are deliberate. The way they were packed, the backpack wasn't tossed, was placed. The mattress was dry, sealed in plastic until we opened it. And that message." He pointed toward the inside of the container door where forensics was now taking high-resolution scans of the carved message. "It doesn't read like someone who gave up. It reads like someone who was trapped but fighting." Back at the station, Detective Sam Nunez was working through a mountain of archived evidence. He'd reopened Jessica Meyer's file that morning, spreading it across a corkboard wall in interview room B. Photos, phone records, bank statements, school, files, maps, all of it. He was particularly focused on the last week of Jessica and Avery's known activity, June 2009. According to phone records, Jessica had made 2 calls the day before she vanished. One to her sister Laura, one to a private number that had never been traced. Sam ran it again. This time he got a hit. The number belonged to a burner phone purchased from a gas station to towns over, no name attached. No credit card link, but the station still had receipts from that week. He contacted the manager, asked about security footage to his surprise. They still had archival tapes. That evening, he drove to the station, combed through hours of grainy security cam footage until he spotted something. A man with a military-style buzzcat, same jacket as the man in the photo from the flip phone. He bought the phone in cash, a prepaid card, nothing else, but he left behind a receipt with partial fingerprints. Sam sent it to the lab. They were getting closer. At a local motel just off Highway 6, another officer interviewed Rob Rees again, the mechanic who discovered the container. He was trying to remember when he'd last seen someone near the hillside before he opened it. He couldn't recall anything recent, but then he frowned. "There was a guy," Rob said years ago, maybe 2011 or 2012, said he was looking for a missing. Trela claimed it belonged to his cousin, said it rolled down the hill during a storm. Asked if I had any salvage equipment in that direction. "Do you remember what he looked like?" the officer asked. "Tall, quiet, had that kind of look like a vet, maybe real serious. Gloves on, even in spring." "Did he give a name?" "No," Rob said, "but he had a car, a red pickup, late 90s, with the back bed dented on the passenger side. That was something." The police issued a request to body shops within a 100-mile radius. "Anyone bring in a red pickup with a dented passenger rear between 2011 and 2013? One shop responded. "Yeah," the owner said. "Guy came in to get it sealed up real good, welded something under the chassis. Seemed paranoid. Do you still have the work order?" "I might." They did, and there was a name, not a real one, but a name that matched a former alias in a different missing persons case. It was the first real break they'd had in 12 years. Meanwhile, Laura stayed in town. quietly visiting the forensics office each day as new evidence was cataloged. On the third day, one of the techs handed her a sealed bag. Inside was a folded, hand-drawn map lined in pencil with childlike handwriting. There were labeled trees, a winding river, a stick figure under a triangle roof marked home. At the bottom, in crooked letters, "Me plus Mom, safe here." Laura pressed her hand to her mouth, her chest tight. It wasn't just the belongings they were finding. It was Avery. She had been alive. She had drawn that map. The question was it drawn recently or over a decade ago? For the first time in over a decade, there was momentum. Detective Sam Nunez pinned the photocopy of Avery's hand-drawn map next to the scratched message from the container. Beneath it, he taped a post-it, 2 voices, same location. The childlike handwriting was distinct misshapen letters, backward S's, consistent with a young writer. But the paper quality, the freshness of the pencil marks, and the absence of yellowing suggested something unexpected. The map might not be from 2009. It could be much more recent. The forensics lab confirmed what Sam suspected. The notebook paper came from a mass-produced batch manufactured between 2017 and 2020. It wasn't archival. It wasn't something a 7-year-old had drawn and forgotten. Someone, likely Avery, had drawn that map years after she was presumed gone. It's changed everything at the sheriff's office. Laura sat across from a digital technician who'd recovered fragments of deleted messages from the flip phone found inside the container. Most were corrupted, containing metadata, broken threads. But one message stood out. It had never been sent, drafted, and saved to Elmer Myers. Subject: if you find this, Avery's okay. Please tell them I didn't know. I should have seen it sooner. I stayed too long. I kept thinking I could fix it or wait it out, but we weren't alone. I wasn't the only one watching her. He had plans even when I didn't. I'm trying to get out now, somewhere north past Granger. There's a trail behind the orchard. If anything happens, go there. There's a door in the trees. Laura stared at the final line over and over. There's a door in the trees, a poetic phrase. But what did it mean? Detective Nunez entered the room quietly holding a folder. "We just got confirmation from the auto shop in Breton," he said. "The red pickup we asked about, the man who brought it in, paid cash under the name Terry Voss." "That's an alias," Laura said. "Alias for who?" Nunez opened the folder. Inside was a mugshot dated 2004. A lean man with a military buzzcat, blank expression, wearing an orange jumpsuit. His real name is Clint Haywood. He was arrested for aggravated stalking in Tacoma. Back in 2003, charges were dropped after the victim left the state, but we found something else. After 2008, he changed his name 3 times and began working under label construction jobs. Across Oregon and Washington? "And you think he knew Jessica?" Laura asked. "We're starting to think he may have been involved from the beginning." 3 counties over, a drone survey team was dispatched near the Orchard Trail north of Granger, the one mentioned in Jessica's unsent message. It was a remote area, mostly state-owned land, dotted with old mining roads and unpaved paths. The forestry department had logged part of it back in 2002, but most of it had gone untouched since. Satellite imagery showed an irregular clearing, just beyond a steep bluff. Dense tree canopy had made it nearly impossible to spot on foot. It would be hard to find unless you were looking for something specific. They sent a ground team the next morning. It took 4 hours to locate the spot described in Jessica's note. A narrowing dirt path led into a thick section of spruce and fir trees. Midway through, a clearing opened, wide enough to have once housed a cabin, though no structure remained. But one of the officers noticed something buried in the roots of an overturned log. A metal trapdoor. The kind you might cover with brush or plywood if you were hiding something. They cleared the area and lifted it. Beneath it was a root cellar. Dry, 6 by 10 feet, reinforced with sheet metal and cinder blocks. It had clearly been used and not for storage. Inside were the remains of a sleeping bag, old canned food wrappers, a battery-powered lantern, and 3 plastic storage bins labeled with masking tape, each with a name: Jessica, Avery, Clint. 1 bin was empty. Jessica's contained only a torn hoodie and a hairbrush. Avery's held newer items, a well-worn paperback, a child's t-shirt, size 10 to 12, a deck of cards, and a photograph taped to the underside of the lit selfie of Jessica and Avery, slightly blurred, taken somewhere outdoors, possibly near the coast. But the strangest discovery came last. Tucked behind a piece of insulation was a notebook, lined paper, stapled spine, filled with hand-drawn maps, sketches, and short diary-style notes in a young person's handwriting. One entry read, "We hear his truck at night. Sometimes Mom says, not to answer, he doesn't know we're here. She says she has a plan. I miss Laura. I hope she still lives in the yellow house." The team took everything in for analysis. Back at the station, Laura was shown the photo. Tears ran down her cheeks the moment she saw it. "That's recent," she said. "She looks at least 12 there." She was right. Forensics dated the photo using file metadata recovered from the old phone's SD card. It was taken in 2015, 6 years after. Jessica and Avery were declared missing 6 years after the world stopped looking. And now, there was only one question that mattered. Where did Avery go next? Because if the map was recent, if the diary was real, it meant Avery had been alive and moving as recently as a few years ago, and someone, somewhere, still knew where she was. The discovery of the root cellar shattered every existing timeline. It proved that Jessica and Avery had survived long after 2009. It proved they'd been on the move, hiding not just from the world but from someone who knew them well enough to follow. The forensic team spent 2 full days cataloging every object inside the underground space. The evidence bins were marked, sealed, and shipped out to labs across the state. But the most important item, Avery's handwritten notebook, stayed in the hands of Detective Sam Nunez. He read every page carefully, studying the uneven pencil strokes, the way the letters changed over time. The earlier pages were filled with drawings and playful map-screwed renderings of forest paths, creeks, and stick figures labeled Me and Mom. But after page 32, the tone shifted. "Clint walked past again today. We stayed quiet. Mom let me use the phone. We didn't send anything. I think she's scared. I hear her crying when she thinks I'm asleep." Then one page stood out. "Mom said if anything ever happens, go to the door in the trees. She said Laura will find me." That phrase, again, the door in the trees. Detective Nunez stared at the words, circling the phrase twice in his notes. He flipped to the final entry, a single sentence written shakily across the top of the last page. "I heard him say my name." That was the last thing Avery wrote. The rest of the notebook was blank. Meanwhile, at a facility outside Olympia, a crime scene reconstruction expert was assigned to the container. You're using 3D modeling. They recreated the contents and their arrangement to help determine how recently the space had been accessed. Dust patterns, insect activity, and signs of water intrusion helped narrow the estimate. Conclusion: the shipping container had been entered as recently as late 2021. That meant someone, possibly Clint Haywood, had returned to the site just months before the discovery. He wasn't just part of the past, could still be active. Laura was staying in a motel by the station when the knock came at her door. It was just past 6 p.m., light rain outside. She opened the door to find Detective Nunez holding a manila envelope. "We found something in one of the taped bins," he said. He handed her a photo, unsealed. It was Avery again, but older, probably 13 or 14, standing on a gravel path holding a fishing rod, looking off to the side. Her hair was longer, pulled into a braid. She was smiling slightly. There was a man beside her. Laura's hand clenched. "The photo, that's not Clint," she said. Nunez nodded. We ran it through databases. No match yet, but judging from the timestamps and the camera model, this photo was likely taken around 2017. Laura looked at him, stunned. "You're telling me she was still alive 3 years ago?" Nunez hesitated. "We don't know where she is now. But she was with someone new, and Clint might not have been alone in this." He paused. "There may be others." Meanwhile, the state cold case unit dug deeper into Clint Haywood's background. His real identity had been buried under years of forged documents, cash jobs, and false addresses. But eventually, a pattern emerged. In 2007, Clint had worked at a salvage yard near Newburgh, less than an hour from Jessica's home. He'd been hired as a driver, making occasional runs between private properties and storage depots. One of those depots, as it turned out, was just 5 blocks from where Jessica had disappeared. There were no digital records left, but a handwritten ledger from the depot listed a unit rented under the name Charles W. The handwriting was crude, inconsistent, but forensics later matched it to Clint's 2004 arrest records. That unit had been cleared in 2012 after years of non-payment, but the timing aligned almost perfectly with the period when Avery stopped writing in her notebook. That the biggest surprise came from the recovered flip phone. A technician recovered a single audio file from the damaged SD card. It was badly corrupted. Only a few seconds could be saved, but what survived was clear a young girl's voice. "Mom says we can't talk long. But if Laura finds this, tell her I remember the yellow house and the music she played. I miss it." Then static, then silence. The next day, Laura sat down across from Nunez at the sheriff's office, her eyes red but alert. "She's still out there," she said firmly, "and I think she's trying to be found." Nunez nodded slowly. "I think you're right." He turned over a new photo, just printed from the flip phone's backup data. It showed Avery's backpack, the dolphin charm still dangling, slightly bent. But behind it, partially visible on the wall of the container, was something no one had noticed before. Drawn in crayon, faded but unmistakable. It was a Dora sketch of a tree-covered trail, and at the end of it, a dark arch with a handle. A child's rendition of the phrase that had appeared in both the note and the diary. "The door in the trees." Only this time, underneath it, Avery had written something else. "I'll wait there." They weren't just looking for clues anymore. They were following her trail. And if she had survived all these years, one thing was becoming more and more certain. Avery had left breadcrumbs for someone. And that someone was Laura. It was just after 7 a.m. when Detective Nunez and Laura arrived at the trailhead north of Granger, the one Avery had described in her unsent message as being past the orchard. The trail had been closed to the public for years due to washouts and unstable ground, but the Forestry Service gave them access under tight supervision. Armed with Avery's hand-drawn map, the photograph of the sketch door, and GPS data triangulated. From the old flip phone, they started walking. The forest was dense and humid that morning, the canopy overhead filtering the light into soft greens and golds. Laura walked a step ahead of the search deputy, scanning the surroundings like she was expecting to see Avery step out from behind a tree. "I kept thinking she might be watching us," she whispered at one point, like she'd somehow know. The team followed the old orchard fence line, now overtaken by moss and brush, until they reached a narrowing curve. On the map, Avery had drawn this point with a small symbolist star next to a stick figure holding a lantern. That's where they found it. The trail dipped down through a break in the trees, revealing a small grove of tall pine and cedar, and there, tucked behind the roots of a sloping hillside, was a structure, not a door exactly, but what looked like an opening covered with old plywood. Moss grew along the seams and brambles covered the sides. Plywood had faint markings. On it, someone had scratched into the wood with a rock or nail. "Wait here." Deputies drew their weapons, approaching cautiously. Nunez motioned for everyone to hold back. Laura stood frozen behind him, gripping Avery's photo so tightly it crinkled. When they pulled the plywood aside, it revealed a narrow dugout passage leading down into the earth. The walls were reinforced with scrap wood and corrugated metal sheets. A series of makeshift steps had been carved into the dirt. They called down. No answer. Slowly, they descended. Inside was a small underground space, no bigger than a garden. Shed, it was damp but intact. In one corner, a child's sleeping bag, a battery lantern, long dead, food wrappers, and water bottles. A child's drawing was pinned to one of the wooden beams with a rusted nail. It showed 2 stick figures standing beneath a tree, one with M for Mom. The other A underneath in capital letters, "I'm waiting." But Avery wasn't there for the next several days. The FBI and local authorities treated the area as an active recovery site. Dogs were brought in, soil samples were collected, an old tin can with a partial fingerprint, possibly Jessica's, was found buried beneath the sleeping bag. Loose floorboard in the dugout concealed a bundle of notes, folded and stuffed inside. A waterproof granola bar wrapper. They were messages, short, cautious, and scattered across dates ranging from 2013 to 2019. One read, "If someone finds this, please tell Laura I remember the yellow curtains." Another, "He doesn't come anymore. I think he's gone, but I don't know how far." And one more, "I left a box behind. I hope it wasn't opened." That evening, Laura sat with Nunez, going over every note, every timeline. The weight of it all was setting in the years her niece had lived in hiding, moving from shelter to shelter, leaving signs like trail markers. She was waiting for someone to follow the trail, Laura said, almost to herself. She didn't know if it would be me or someone else, but she didn't stop. She wanted to be found. Nunez agreed. But if she moved again, he said, where would she go next? He was already steps ahead. The map Avery drew, he said, tapping the sheet again, included a detail we missed. This little triangle's not just a tree. He slid a printout beside it, a satellite image from a few miles east. There's a ranger's fire shelter out there, built in the 80s, long abandoned. One wrote in. Avery had maps, or her mom taught her to navigate terrain. She might have known about it, and no one checked it before. It's barely on record. The next morning, before sunrise, the search team mobilized. They traveled the old service road in pairs, navigating washed-out dirt paths and logging debris until they reached the fire shelter. From the outside, it looked forgotten. One door. Windows boarded up, but someone had cleared the path, brushed away debris, removed moss from the handle. When they entered, they found bedding warm, a bowl with traces of food, a tin water bottle still half full. And, on the back wall, taped with old masking tape, a photo. Laura recognized it instantly. It was her holding baby Avery. That photo had never left her home. Her eyes widened. She staggered back. "She's here," Laura whispered. "She's still here." Nunez found something else, a small strip of paper on the table. Weighed down with a rock, scrawled in ink. "I knew you'd come." For a few seconds, no one said a word. Laura stood in the center of the fire shelter, frozen in place, her eyes fixed. On the note weighted beneath the stone, "I knew you'd come." It wasn't just a message, it was a confirmation. Avery had made it here. She'd been alive, maybe still was. Nunez scanned the room slowly. There were signs of recent activity everywhere. The sleeping pad still warm, a camping lantern with fresh batteries, a tin of instant oatmeal open on the shelf, and 3 small drawings taped to the inside of a cupboard door. One was of 2 stick figures standing by a lake, another showed a brown dog labeled Tuck, and the third showed a single tree with a hollow in its trunk. Inside the hollow, a small curled figure drawn in crayon. It was signed. "She's been moving," Nunez said quietly, but she didn't go far. The team searched the surrounding area for hours. A mile out, a deputy found boot prints in soft earth, leading toward a dried-up creek. About 20 feet past the water, they found a set of markings scratched into tree bark. 4 vertical lines, 1 diagonal 5 days ago. That night, Laura didn't sleep. She stayed at the ranger shelter while search teams fanned out. Command post was established on the main road with K-9 units, drones, and volunteers from multiple counties. By morning, it had become one of the largest active recovery efforts in the state in over a decade, but despite the scale, there was no trace of Avery, no sightings, no calls. Just silence until one of the searchers found something unusual along the ravine. It was a piece of fabric, a small square torn from a hoodie. The team lead bagged it immediately. Printed across the faded blue cotton in peeling iron in letters was a name, Avery. The search intensified. Laura was brought to the spot personally. She knelt down and stared at the folded cloth in the evidence bag. "I made that sweater for her," she said. "In 2nd grade, I used to iron letters on everything so she wouldn't lose things." It wasn't just a clue, it was a sign. Avery had dropped it deliberately. "She's leading us," Laura said. Nunez agreed. This whole time she's been leaving a trail. At headquarters, analysts began piecing together a probable path based on Avery's known locations: the container, the root cellar, the hidden fire shelter, and now the ravine. Every stop was connected by old Forest Service roads and back trails, leading away from the 2009 disappearance site in Oregon and pushing slowly northwest toward the coastal region of Grace Harbor. It was a pattern, and at the center of it was movement. She's always staying ahead, one analyst noted. Every time someone gets close, she leaves a mark, a note, a trace, like she wants to be found, but never caught. And then came the break they weren't expecting. A wildlife camera, set up by the Department of Fish and Wildlife, placed months ago to monitor deer populations, had captured an image 4 nights earlier. It showed a girl no more than 18, walking near a ridgeline at sunset. She had long brown hair in a braid, a gray hooded sweatshirt, and a canvas backpack slung over one shoulder. She was carrying something in her arms, possibly a dog. The timestamp matched the markings on the tree, 5 days ago. Forensic photo enhancement zoomed in on the bag zipper. Hanging from it was a small dolphin charm. It was her Avery Myers. Alive news spread fast. The media got hold of the story and began broadcasting the headline: "Missing Oregon Girl Believed to Be Alive After 13 Years." Requests poured in, offers to help. Theories some that Jessica might be alive too. Others that Avery had been held or was in hiding or part of something larger. But investigators stayed focused. They now knew where she was heading. A park ranger suggested one final place: an abandoned maintenance cabin built near the edge of an old logging route. It had been shuttered for years, accessible only by foot. Close to the ridgeline where Avery had been seen, they decided to send a small team quiet. No uniforms, no sirens. Laura, Nunez, and 2 plainclothes deputies. They reached the cabin near dusk. The door was ajar, no signs of forced entry. A single shoe print, smaller than average, marked the mud outside. Laura's heart pounded. She stepped inside. The room was small, cold. A camping mat was set up in the corner. There was a pile of firewood, some food wrappers, and then sitting on the table, spiral notebook with a folded page sticking out. Laura reached for it with trembling hands. It was a letter. "I'm sorry I couldn't stay. I was close. I saw the lights. I was going to come out, but I didn't know who else was with you. I got scared. I don't know who to trust, but I know you came. I knew you would. I'm going to the place with the blue roof. You showed it to me once. I remember. I'll be there soon." Laura's knees nearly gave out. She whispered, "The blue roof." Nunez turned toward her. "What is it?" "It's a vacation rental," she said, "on the coast. We went once when she was little. She loved it. I showed her the photos again when she was older, just once." She looked up at him, her eyes filled with something that hadn't been there before. Certainty. She remembered they now had a destination. They were closer than ever, but they weren't the only ones following the trail. Far behind them, at the edge of the trailhead, a man sat in an idling truck, watching. No badge, no uniform, just eyes. That had been waiting far too long, and a map with one line circled in red: the place with the blue roof. By the time they reached the highway, Laura's hands were shaking. She hadn't seen the house in over a decade. The vacation rental with the blue metal roof sat on a remote stretch of coast near Westport. Washington, a quiet, weathered cabin perched at the end of a gravel road facing the ocean. The last time they were there, Avery had been 6, bouncing. Between tide pools and pink rain boots, while Jessica grilled burgers on a rusted-out fire pit, Laura had taken a photo from the porch, Avery smiling with salt water in her hair, arms outstretched toward the sky. That photo still lived in a box back home, buried under years of lost hope. Now they were going back, and it was possible Avery was doing the same. Detective Nunez coordinated with local authorities in Grace Harbor. The plan was simple: get to the house quietly, secure the perimeter, and wait. No sirens, no fanfare, just patience. But there was one problem. The house wasn't empty. When deputies arrived, they found tire tracks in the gravel, fresh ones. and a dented red pickup parked in the brush behind the property, the same red pickup that Rob Rees, as the mechanic, had described nearly 2 weeks ago. Passenger side dented, rear panel welded, no plates. The truck was warm. Nunez pulled Laura aside. "Want to be clear, we don't know who's inside. It could be Avery, but it could be someone else." Laura swallowed, nodding. They waited for backup a plainclothes unit from the sheriff's department. Just after dusk, 2 unmarked cars rolled up and blocked the access road. One officer moved into the tree line with binoculars, scanning the windows. Then he stopped. "There's someone on the 2nd floor," he said into the radio. "Female, young. She's sitting by the window. Looks like she's writing something." Laura's heart skipped. "Can you confirm her age?" Nunez asked. "Early 20s, maybe late teens. Long hair. Can't see her face clearly." It was enough. Nunez ordered a slow approach. The officer surrounded the Home 1 deputy, moved to the rear. Another kept eyes on the window. Laura stayed behind the front. Patrol car, gripping the door handle so tightly her knuckles turned white. Then a crash glass broke upstairs. Movement. Rear window just shattered. 2nd floor. A voice came through the radio. Deputies rushed the door, guns drawn, voices, shouting "Sheriff's Department." Hands where we can see them, but inside, silence. By the time they reached the upstairs room, the girl was gone. Curtains blew in the wind. A shattered lamp lay in pieces on the floor. The 2nd-story window had been broken from the inside. A blanket tied around the curtain rod dangling out toward the ground outside. A deputy found footprints in the dirt barefoot heading west, toward the bluff. They ran. Flashlights cutting through the dark as they followed the trail. Someone shouted, "There's movement by the tree line." But by the time they reached the edge of the hill, it was too late, just footprints leading to the edge and gone. Back at the cabin, Laura searched the room the girl had been in. Walls were blank, the furniture dusty, but a single piece of paper lay on the bed, another note, written quickly, sloppy handwriting. "I saw you. I was there. I didn't know who else came. I thought it was him. I had to run. I'm sorry." It wasn't signed, but the paper was folded around something. Laura opened it carefully. Inside was a photo, a recent one. It showed Avery, maybe 18 or 19, standing near a wooded trail. She was older, taller, but her face was unmistakable. She was smiling. In the background, a shadowy figure stood just out of focus, slightly turned away. The photo had been taken without their knowledge. Laura handed it to Nunez, who stared at it for a long time. "We've seen him before," he said. "Oh." Print from the recovered SD card, the man in the work vest standing beside Jessica years ago. Same man, same posture, same profile. Clint Haywood, still alive, still near. Later that night, deputies discovered the red truck had been wiped clean. No prints, no plates, no papers, but inside the glove box was a single item. A cassette tape, old, worn, unlabeled. They rushed it to the station for digitization. When the audio played back, Laura leaned in. It started with static, then a voice, a girl's voice. Mom said, "If we ever got separated, I should leave pieces behind so that someone could follow." She said, "The world doesn't see people like us once we're quiet." Then more static. Then, "I don't know where Mom is now, but I kept going. I kept looking for the right time." Then silence. Then a whispered line so faint it had to be enhanced. 3 times. "Please tell Laura I'm not far." Laura covered her mouth, her eyes brimming again. The search wasn't over. Avery hadn't vanished again. She was close. And now the investigators knew something else, too. She wasn't just running away, she was running from him, and someone had. Helped her more than once. The only question was, who was helping her now, and were they trying to protect her or keep her hidden? Detective Nunez stood with his arms folded, staring at the evidence board in the Grace Harbor substation. Dozens of pieces were tacked up now. Photos, timelines, handwritten notes from Avery, the map, the audio transcripts, the truck registration traces. But one photo stayed at the center of it all. The blurry, grainy image from the fire shelter, where Avery had taped up a picture of herself and her mother. Next to it, pinned with a red thumbtack, was the clearest still they had of Clint Haywood. His face in both photos hadn't aged much, but his presence had only grown darker, like a shadow Avery couldn't outrun. Back to tour every shelter, every escape. Somewhere along the way, he'd always reappeared. Not a single direct sighting in nearly 4 years. "We're missing something," Nunez muttered, rubbing his temples. Meanwhile, Laura sat in a small interview room down the hall, listening as a forensics tech reviewed the contents of the cassette tape they'd recovered from Clint's truck. There's no music, no recording of Avery herself, just clips scattered out of sequence, some conversations, ambient noise, what sounds like forest sounds and footsteps, and a few partial phrases. He played one. "She left before dawn." Another. "Don't let her see you again." And one more. "We had a deal. You don't cut off by static." Then a deep male voice, slightly muffled but distinct. She was supposed to stay quiet. Laura sat upright. "That voice?" she whispered. "That's him, isn't it?" "Right." The tech nodded. "We believe it's Clint Haywood or someone she was with. It's unclear if these were recorded with intent or by accident, but it sounds like they were made inside a vehicle. Probably that truck." Nunez entered the room quietly, holding a new manila envelope. He placed it on the table in front of Laura. "What is it?" she asked. New search warrants came through. Gained access to the truck's VIN history. It turned out Clint didn't buy it directly. It was acquired at auction 5 years ago under a false name, but it originally belonged to a small construction firm that shut down in 2011. He flipped open the envelope and pulled out a document. And guess where they operated for 10 years? Before they folded, Laura looked up. Yamhill County. She said the same place Jessica and Avery had vanished from the following day. Investigators tracked down a former employee from that construction firm. A retired electrician who remembered Clint under a different alias. "He was always odd," the man said, kept to himself. "But I remember once he mentioned living off the grid, said he'd been building his own shelter out by the coast." I thought. He was joking. "Do you remember where?" Nunez asked. "Somewhere near the cliffs south of the lighthouse." He said it was hard to reach, no roads, only foot access. That was all Nunez needed. By afternoon, a team of 6 officers, including a forest tracker and canine unit, moved into the region just south of the lighthouse. It was treacherous terrain, overgrown switchbacks, loose rock, and brush so thick it swallowed the trail entirely after just a mile. They used machetes to push through. Drones couldn't reach them through the canopy. But the canine hit a scent marker just before sunset, near a dead tree marked with a faded pink ribbon. And 50 feet downhill, tucked beneath a rock outcrop, they found it. A shack, not a full structure, just a reinforced lean-to made of driftwood, plywood, and a heavy canvas tarp. It was cleverly hidden. It's visible only from certain angles. Inside were the remains of a long-abandoned camp, empty food tins, a water filter, an old book titled Tracking the Seasons, and another photo taped to the inside of the wall. This one was different. It wasn't Avery. It was Jessica. She looked tired, sunken eyes, tangled hair, but alive, sitting beside what looked like a stone fire pit. And behind her, standing further back, was someone else. It wasn't Clint. Nunez stared at the man in the image. He was older, gray in the beard, holding something in his hands, a radio, a notebook. Laura squinted. "That's not him," she said. "That's someone else." The photo was time-stamped. May 2015, nearly 6 years after they disappeared. That night, a storm rolled in off the coast, forcing the search team to halt. Laura stayed at the station, flipping through the photos on the table. Her fingers lingered on the one with Jessica. It was the first time she had seen her sister's face in over a decade, older, weathered, but unmistakably Jess. She traced her eyes with her finger. "She made it this far," she whispered. "She stayed alive." Nunez looked at her, and maybe Avery did too, because of her. Then he slid a new report across the table. It was from a park ranger who had responded to a trespassing report just 2 weeks ago. A woman seen on private forest land near the old fire roads west of CVU. She had long brown hair, was carrying a small bag, and had a limp. She disappeared before anyone could make contact, but the person who called it in had seen her from his porch and snapped a photo. Laura stared at it. The image was blurry, but the figure in the trees had something hanging from her wrist. A dolphin charm. They were closer now than they had ever been. Avery was still ahead, cautious, moving, but leaving pieces behind. And just as the officers prepared to head out again the next morning, a call came into the tip line from a payphone for Towns East. The caller didn't leave a name, just 5 words: "She's going home today alone." Then the line went dead. It was still dark when Laura and Detective Nunez reached the outskirts of the Insare neighborhood. The yellow house sat at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac in Yamhill County. The one Laura still owned, though she hadn't lived there full-time in years. It had been rented, abandoned, and then left empty since 2019. But Laura never changed the curtains pale. Yellow, slightly faded, Avery's favorite color. Now, someone was coming back to it. The payphone tip was too precise to ignore. "She's going home today alone." No voice recognition, no security cam near the booth, just a single, impossible call, and the undeniable sense that it was real, that it was Avery. They waited in an unmarked cruiser 2 blocks away, no lights, no uniforms, just quiet. Laura held the dolphin charm in her hand, the one found near the ravine. Her fingers moved over it slowly, the way she used to do when Avery was small, whenever the girl got nervous and needed something to hold. "She's scared," Laura said. "She's still not sure who to trust." Nunez nodded. "She'll come if she sees you, but not if she sees us." "I want to wait on the porch," Laura said. He hesitated, then agreed. At 6:42 a.m., just as the sun began to rise, Laura stepped onto the porch of the yellow house and sat on the top step. The morning was cold, the sky overcast, pink and silver streaks bleeding into low clouds. She waited. Minutes passed. Car drove by, then silence again, until footsteps. From the front, from the side yard, Laura turned slowly. A figure stepped into view. A girl, a young woman now, thin, wearing a gray hoodie, a faded canvas backpack on her shoulder, long brown hair in a braid. Her eyes met Laura's for the first time in over 13 years. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Laura stood up slowly, carefully. "Avery," she said softly. The girl's face twisted, her jaw clenched. Then, barely a whisper, "Aunt Laura." Laura took one step forward, tears already spilling. Avery dropped the bag. They ran to each other at the same time, no words, just arms around each other, tight, trembling, sobbing. Laura held her like she would never let go again. Inside the house, they sat at the kitchen table for over an hour before Avery could speak clearly. "I was going to come sooner," she said, "but I didn't know if he'd be there." "He's not," Laura told her. "You're safe now." Avery nodded slowly. "Is she?" Laura began. "Your mom?" Avery's eyes welled. "She died 2 years ago, out near the water. She was sick, but we didn't know how bad." Laura placed her hand gently over Avery's. "She saved me," Avery whispered. "All those years we kept moving. She always knew when to leave. She never stopped." Looking over her shoulder, the station later that day, Avery sat with Nunez and 2 investigators. Her story came out in pieces. From the night in 2009, when Clint first forced his way into their lives. A man Jessica had trusted once, briefly, who later began controlling her movement, threatening her with secrets, demanding silence. He kept them in shelters, trailers, safe houses he built himself, off-grid. He was always watching, listening, sometimes disappearing for weeks, sometimes showing up with supplies, sometimes drunk. Jessica had tried to escape twice. The first time, they were found and relocated. The second time, Jessica faked a medical emergency, and it worked. Clint disappeared for nearly 2 years. That was when they moved deeper into the forest. That was when Avery began leaving notes, drawings, map pieces, Mom said. If something happened, Avery told them that I should find a way back, that she thought Laura would still be looking. "And you did," Nunez said quietly. Avery nodded. "I was tired of running. I didn't want to be scared anymore." "Do you know where he is now?" Nunez asked. "I think so." Later that night, acting on Avery's description of Clint's most recent hideout, underground structure near the base of a decommissioned ranger, Tower Police entered the site with a warrant. They found no one there, but in the back room of the bunker. They discovered audio tape recordings, tools, documents, photos, and a map with locations marked in red. At the top of the page, written in block letters, "Must watch her. She'll break." The note was signed, CH. He had been planning to take Avery back, but she had escaped his orbit, and now the world knew. In the months that followed, Avery began therapy. She moved in with Laura and started her GED coursework. She remained guarded. Slow to speak, but she smiled more often. On her 21st birthday, Laura gave her a new notebook. On the first page, Avery wrote a single line, "I'm not running anymore." As for Clint Haywood, the man who orchestrated it all, who haunted every step of Avery's life, he was never caught. His name, his face, and his methods were broadcast nationally, and law enforcement reopened 5 old missing persons cases tied to the regions where he'd once lived, because now they knew Jessica and Avery Myers weren't the only ones who had vanished. They were just the only ones who left a trail strong enough to follow home.